Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel of Navigating the Technology Investment Landscape. My name is Anis Uzzaman, and I am the founder and general partner at Pegasus Tech Ventures. Along with me, I have a great set of panelists here. I have Courtney McCollum, I have Sebastian Vidal, I have Moar Assia, and I have also Ali Madav. So welcome everyone, welcome to the panel. I will actually go with the panelists, and I will like to ask all of you to actually give a brief introductions of who you are and what you have done and how do you navigate technology as you are doing your own job in some sense. So I'm gonna get started with Courtney. Courtney, go ahead, please introduce
Great.
yourself and a little bit of background.
Thanks. So my name is Courtney McColgan. I'm the founder of Aruna, which is an automating payroll for Latin America. We developed a payroll software. I've spent the last 8 years in Latin America, but prior to Latin America, I lived in the States, grew up in California, Berkeley for undergrad, Stanford for business school, and started 2 companies previously. My first company when I was 22, my second when I was 28, both tech companies, and then worked in investing in venture capital in Silicon Valley, also focused on tech companies. So common thread there.
Thank you very much. Then I'm going to go to Sebastian. Sebastian, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Anis. My name is Sebastian Vidal. I used to was a former executive director of a program called Startup Chile in Chile, which basically was the first country to give visas to startups all over the world to more than 120 countries so far. So in the last 10 years, I've been working in programs that support early stage startups from all over the world. Startup Chile at the beginning, and then in parallel team out of Puerto Rico, where we work with South American startups and giving them access to the US market. So far, we have worked with a little bit over 1,000 companies, invested more than $50 million into those startups. So it's interesting to see how the ecosystem is changing over the years and more rapidly in the last couple of years.
Thank you, Sebastian. Welcome to the panel again. Next, I'm going to go for Moar. Moar, go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Moar Assia. I'm the founding partner of iAngels. I come from a tech and business background. I grew up in Israel. I served in the military as part of our intelligence corps in a unit called 8200, which is breeding a lot of the talent that is pouring into the high-tech ecosystem in Israel. So I had a technological role in the military, then pursued a bachelor's degree in mathematics and computer science at the Technion, which is like Israel's MIT. Worked in the field for several years, coding, leading development teams at SAP in Israel, then moved to New York, did my MBA there at Columbia University with focus on strategy and technology, and worked thereafter in the city for IBM, Global Business Services Division, doing corporate strategy, and then in Israel for Amdocs, doing corporate strategy. And then about 8 years ago, I left to found iAngels. iAngels is an investment firm based out of Israel. We are a platform and VC fund. This means that we have a traditional VC fund, as well as a platform that allows investors from all over the world to co-invest with the fund. This was actually our initial product. So over the years, we grew both products and also into 2017 initiated a blockchain fund across all assets. We're managing today about $350 million, invested in over 100 companies over the years. And I think a unique aspect about how we run our business is that we're able to invest along the company throughout the cycle. So from very, very early stages all the way to their IPO rounds. And so we've had several companies that have done this journey together with us. Happy to share more insight further on into our call.
Thank you very much, Moar, and welcome to the panel again. Next, I'm going to go to Ali. Ali, please go ahead. Introduce yourself.
First off, thanks so much for having me. Ali Madav, managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund. We invest in and venture build top-tier startups. We've got 55 companies around the world across 6 continents. I also serve as a limited partner on Loyal VC and Draper Goren Home and consult organizations such as the United Nations and INSEAD. And then I serve on the board of 2 public companies in the blockchain space as well. One is called CryptoStar, which is a Toronto Stock Exchange venture company, and the other is called Mechanical Technologies, which is a NASDAQ listed company.
Thank you, Ali. Welcome to the panel again. So today's theme of the panel is navigating the technology landscape, and how do we do that with the ever-changing technology around us. I think I will ask all of you that how do you navigate the technology areas, and how do you pick up the technology areas as you're investing or as you're putting your time and energy into a startup. So I'm going to actually go random, and I'm going to go with Moar first. And I'm going to ask you that you're an investor and you're in a pretty good, area. You're in Israel, I know that, and technology is booming there. How do you navigate through the technology and decide which area to concentrate now versus tomorrow, right? Can you give us an idea? How do you do that yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, naturally there are funds that focus on specific sectors and they want to be, the champions of that sector. However, I feel that with, as you said, the ever growing and ever changing technology landscape, I think for us, we prefer not to narrow ourselves in terms of our investment thesis to one or two sectors, because there are sectors today that exist that didn't exist 5 years ago, or there are new things and new innovation cycles that you can't anticipate. It's like new things that are happening every single day. So for us, we are a team of 20 professionals in Israel. And one of the things that we try to do is really do a lot of research. When we recognize that there is a space or sector that's starting to pick up more momentum in Israel, we do a lot of research on it, and we map out the entire landscape and all the entrepreneurs that are starting to work on some of these solutions. Some of them are coming from the military, some of them are coming from other places in our network. And so we really want to know what people are working on. And we have the ability to ramp up very quickly into like the subject matter, and thereby are able to make quick decisions also in regards to investment commitments into some of these opportunities. And some of the research doesn't necessarily mean that it's all wins. There was a period of time, for example, about 5 years ago, that we were looking at technologies in the drone space. There were a lot of things coming out of Israel across multiple sectors. We were mapping out all the horizontal plays and all the vertical plays, and conducting interviews and talking to entrepreneurs and seeing companies. I think I saw maybe, I want to say like 36 companies in a period of just a few months. And after that whole research, we decided that it wasn't the right place for us. It's one thing if the technology is drone enabled, but if we're trying to create an innovative drone, or how will we compete with DJI and other big companies, or how would we create a vertical expertise that can champion any other region in the world that has that specific sector in abundance, like construction or whatever it may be. So we actually decided that it's not the right space for us to focus on. However, we did see a lot of talent flowing from drone units in the military into that space. And some of those technologies were very applicable also for the autonomous vehicle space, just as an example. So one of the companies that we saw that was really focused on drone technology, we told them, like, listen, you guys can really pivot into this new and upcoming new sector and chime into what's going on with the automotive space. And that's what I decided to do. We invested, we seeded the company, and we've been working closely with them for the last 5 years on this technology, which is state-of-the-art, high-resolution radar technology for the autonomous car. A lot of the talent was coming from working on chips and silicon and drones in the military, second to none team in the world. And today, 5 years later, we were right on the day 2 weeks ago. We're ringing the bell ceremony on NASDAQ as the company IPO'd via SPAC merger at about a $700 million valuation. So I think if we weren't able to be quick in our analysis, understand where this technology is applicable, work with the founders, I think they may have missed an opportunity to become the radar leader for autonomous vehicles. So I think this is what we need to do every single day when we wake up.
Thank you. More really appreciate it. I know that I have my fellow investor also, Ali. Ali, you do blockchain and crypto, and we see that the technology in this area is going up and down. The political situation also puts a lot of influence into this market. Give us an idea, take us through your journey, and then how you're navigating and how you're looking at the future as you're looking at blockchain and crypto and overall technology.
Absolutely, right. So there's a few different areas of blockchain, and some of those areas are going to touch crypto, and some of them aren't, right? And we actually invest across both of those landscapes. So the first bucket that we sort of cover is what we call blockchain, but not crypto. So this is more enterprise related tech. It could be ag tech, ed tech, music and entertainment. I mean, for example, we've got a company called BeatDap that is solving the problem between reported plays and actual plays in the music industry. You can almost think of it as like an auditor for music streaming. It's a $4.5 billion problem. And now they track over 70 million monthly active users. But then you've got sort of two other buckets that we cover. The next one is what we call companies that service the crypto industry. These may or may not have a cryptocurrency aspect to it, but they work within sort of the cryptocurrency industry. So you can think of exchanges, custodians, market makers, white label credit cards, that sort of thing. And these are really important to sort of connect the dots within the ecosystem. And then the third bucket that we cover is what we call crypto native. So this is DeFi, NFTs, derivatives. And this has been a very popular one that you're probably seeing a lot in the news right now, sort of across social media. We're one of the first backers, for example, or we are the first backer behind Splinterlands, which is now one of the top blockchain games in the world. Axie Infinity and Splinterlands are the two biggest. And I think it's along the lines of what Moar was saying earlier, where you got to really support the company, though. I mean, when we came in, there was still a number of gaps. We came in at the pre-seed round, right? And there was a number of gaps still in the company that we worked very hands-on with the founders to actually solve and scale the company with them. And 3 years later, they're a multi-billion-dollar company and one of the largest in the space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ali. Sebastian, I know that you're in Puerto Rico and you were involved with a pretty big initiative, a startup Chile. Everybody knows about that initiative as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see the technology trends are changing, especially in the post-COVID time? Take us through your journey, as your thought process.
Sure, Anis, and thank you for the question. Yes, I think there's three elements that we're seeing that are constantly changing over the last few years, and more rapidly in the last 2 years. We as a fund and the investments that we have made have been very agnostic in terms of industry, because 10 years ago it was hard to find to understand what sectors we're going to win. So we're trying to be agnostic. Today, I think there's as I said, three elements that we're looking to invest in new technologies and the approach to technology. First, I think COVID somehow decentralized the creation of startups in Latin America. So the volume of companies that were created increased significantly. And that means that we, as an investment and support program to startups, needs to be looking into different ecosystem emerging hubs that are being created because of this new access of opportunities and funding all over the world. So keep an eye on that is the first thing. The second one is that there's a few challenges that arise with COVID related to access to health, access to financial services, infrastructure in terms of broadband, climate technologies, to confront natural disasters. And I think all of those challenges that we have been seeing in the last 5 to 10 years, they escalated and accelerated in the last 2 years. I think it's interesting that because those challenges are there, we need to look into those new technologies to address those challenges, right? So in terms of access to broadband, we're looking into how blockchain can be an element to solve that issue. In terms of financial inclusion, for example, still, for example, in the region where I am, still 50% of the people don't have access to any financial services, or some that are really poor, right? So how do we create more personalized products in terms of financial services? In terms of climate technologies, we're working with a few solutions in the insurance space. How we're going to be insuring a world where natural disasters are increasing 10 times every single year. So it's interesting to see those type of markets and the technology that are going to be needed to solve those fundamental issues. So that's the way that we're seeing technology, and the type of evaluation that we're making when we're supporting startups and we're supporting founders in the early days.
Thank you, Sebastian. This really helps us. I'll talk about technology changes in the post-COVID era also with all of you as well. I'll come back to you all again with this topic. But before I do that, I also wanted to get Courtney, your opinion. Courtney, you're a very successful entrepreneur. You have done multiple companies. You're very international. You're very close to the Silicon Valley ecosystem, Stanford, Berkeley, YC. I mean, you have touched it all. So I know that you're an entrepreneur, and you're currently CEO of Runa, which is a very popular startup. I would like to know from you, please tell us that how you have seen that technology has evolved in the investment arena or in the startup arena. When you also, another thing that in the second half I wanted you to touch base on is that as you pick up areas where you want to build a startup, because you have done multiple of them, how do you do that? Let us know that. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. I think, I mean, Latin America is just booming in the tech sector. A little context on me: when I first moved down to Latin America, I was part of a startup called Cabify that started as a $20 million company and ended as a $1.5 billion company, and opened up offices in 130 cities across 12 countries down here. When we raised money for that company, it was like literally squeezing water from a stone. Closed door in your faces at the one liner that you even are raising money for a Latin American company. People were just not interested, which, by the way, all Latin American companies usually are Delaware C Corps or Cayman companies. So they're not even technically Latin American companies, just that all their operations in the market they serve is down there, right? So, we've seen a total 180 in Latin America in terms of opinions on investing in Latin America, open-mindedness to Latin America. And we saw Union Square Ventures do their first couple of investments in Latin America, which I never thought we would have seen. Lightspeed over this last year has also gotten involved, and all of the major funds all have investments in the region today. So when you knock on the door to a Silicon Valley investor, they don't stop you at the front door saying no to Latin America, which is great. And I think that's really opened up all opportunities for Latin American entrepreneurs. Previously, there were sort of, one or two decision makers down here on whether or not you got funding. And now there's multiple channels you can go through. You can take the YC channel, you can go to Silicon Valley, you can work with local investors. And there's a whole pool of angels, including a lot of LATAM founders and LATAM operators that are seed investing companies. I personally give very, very tiny checks to founders, but it's not so much for the money, but it's then to open up my network of people to say, I put money into this company, you should put money in too. And that's how we ended up with a huge ecosystem of angel investing that we have in Silicon Valley today, where there's, pre-seed and pre-seed and super angels and mega angels and all the different levels that we have, right? So I think it's great to see that starting in Latin America, where over the next 10 years, you'll just really see that blossom. I also think there's so much to do. Market cap of tech companies in Latin America is like 2%, and it's 40% in the United States. So literally every single sector needs to be revolutionized, from banks to where I work in payroll software, but all the other business systems that they use, to everything in the commercial space as well. So I think that's what gets me excited about Latin America, is that every problem you're attacking is a huge problem with a huge pain point. Examples are, bank account penetration is like 30% down here. It's 99% in the United States. Private healthcare penetration for insurance is like 7%. It's again 99% in the United States. And the list goes on and on. We can go through medical services, education, all these other things where just the gap is huge. And clearly, if we're going to bring those products to millions of people at this later stage, it's going to be through technology and a much lower cost model enabled by that technology. So I think that's what gets me excited about LATAM. I think, you're going to have 10x the number of unicorns come out of here over the next 10 years versus the last 10 years. And venture investing is just like a small indicator of that. I mean, this year, LATAM investing is at about 10 billion versus 5 billion last year, and we haven't even finished the year. So it's probably going to 3x from last year. And I think that just speaks to all these opportunities that are available, entrepreneurs finally having the courage and the capital to go after them, which is really neat. And then you asked sort of, how do I go about picking a company and deciding what to do? I think particularly in Latin America, market sizes are large. So I look for companies, and the same thing we did with Runa, where there's a need that is extremely large. There's 22.5 million SMBs in Latin America, 4 million in Mexico, about 7.5 million in Brazil. So there's plenty market for any sort of B2B software that you want that serves those businesses. That was one of the most attractive elements for our payroll software. It's just that all those companies typically run payroll in Excel or a really, really old software that looks like the first version of Microsoft Office I ever imagined. And then the second piece is really the execution side, right? You need an entrepreneur who can, like, Latin America is not for the faint at heart. You really have to know how to navigate down here. I remember one November, like a couple of months after we launched, like they cut the water in the city of Mexico. And I'm like, yeah, but they're going to do it in sections, right? And they're like, no, they're cutting it in the whole city. And I'm like, what? Like for how long? They're like, for a week and a half. I'm like, how am I going to meet my sales goal with a whole city somewhere else, So these are the sorts of things that happen every day down here, in addition to the own complexities of the market that you're operating in, that I think make it exciting, but also quite challenging, right? So you really need someone who's a driver, who's creative, who's clever, and just is eternally optimistic that they'll get there.
So thank you, Courtney. So it is very clear, Courtney, you did your research before you opened up Runa, and you decided to concentrate on HR and payroll in some sense. So very good information for our audience to know as well. I'm going to actually switch my topic a little bit. I know that COVID has changed our life in a big way. We're coming out of that situation, and I'm sure that all of us investors or entrepreneurs are thinking about where to invest our time and energy next. So I'm going to go through that question with all of you. I'm going to start with you, Courtney, this time. So as you see the landscape, and I know that Latin America might be a little bit different, right? Every region has its own choices in some sense. But as you think that we're coming out of COVID, investors or entrepreneurs, both sides, where they should concentrate? What are some of the upcoming technologies you think that entrepreneurs and investors both should focus on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we've all seen a huge increase in the investment of whatever the hell the future of work means. But I think some of the things that it means is recruiting people all over the world, having people work in remote teams, and then finding ways that those teams can better communicate. And we've seen that as a request, even from SMBs in Mexico City, where they're starting to hire remote workers in Colombia or in Peru or in other places in Latin America. Some of them are more adventurous and also hiring across the world in Europe and Asia. But the ability to kind of hire those workers and pay those workers is an obvious one, where we've seen remote payroll platforms go from $0 to billion-dollar companies in less than 2 years. So I think that's very well attacked at this point. But all the other tools that then support kind of the benefits suite, as well as the communication across teams. I think that's a no-brainer. I think outside of that, I think you're also seeing an economic rebound, right? So a lot of the companies that got hit during COVID are having rebounds for coming back. Some of them are slower to come back, as we've seen obviously with corporate travel, and may never come back in the same way that we knew them. But I think there's a lot of B2B businesses, particularly in the software world I live in, where you're starting to see just kind of a rebound, because companies basically haven't been buying for a year and a half and are ready to kind of get going again.
Thank you so much. So next I'm going to go to Moar. Moar, I'm going to ask you the same questions. As we are coming out of COVID, where do you think entrepreneurs and investors should focus? What are the technology areas should be hot from here on?
Yeah. Well, I don't know even to say that we're coming out. Are we coming out of it, or like are we still in the midst of
We're
it?
getting
I
there
feel
with the
like we're still kind
vaccination.
of in a one step forward, two steps back, three steps forward, something like this. But I mean, in Israel, it was really a significant shift, because Israelis, as we all know, we always develop technologies for other markets. We never develop anything for the local market. So we're always trying to look at problems and solve them in other markets. And some of these challenges were that we were constantly traveling. We're traveling to customer sites, doing onboarding, doing implementation, doing integrations. And there's a lot of work that happens at the customer site, because the R&D folks are in Israel. And so just think for a minute that for 2 years, teams couldn't travel at all. Like nobody could travel. And I remember a lot of our companies had to kind of like go back to the drawing board. I'm like, okay, how are we doing, how do we do onboarding to this customer who's supposed to pay us $1 million a year, and we're not even going to see him. We're not even going to be in the same room. And it's a real interesting problem about how can you make your software solutions much more easy on the onboarding process, on the integration. How do you do remote training to employees that are supposed to be using the software? How do you connect with customers and increase sales at the same time, or meet KPI with everything that was going on in the world? I think Israel, by the way, was also a very unique experiment, because our percentage of vaccination is one of the highest in the world. So everybody has already gone through 2-3 vaccinations, including children 12 and up, and now they're talking about even younger ones. So I think from that front, or kind of like from the health agenda, everybody was looking at Israel. Okay, what's going on in Israel? How Israel is so unique in terms of how do they cater to the entire community? How do they treat patients remotely? There was a lot of innovation around digital health, about how do you take care of an extreme sector of your population that you don't want them to come to the hospital, because for them, coming to the hospital might mean that they'll catch something worse than what they actually have. How do you monitor, everything from heart rate, sugar, blood level, saturation, everything remotely, and are able to constantly be on top of everything? And how can these technologies be there, kind of like transmitted to other places in the world that are in a much worse shape than where we are, or where all of us that have been like the last 2 years. So I think there's been a true awakening around digital health. There are a lot of companies in Israel that started off, well before Corona, that all of a sudden during Corona got a serious push, enjoyed tailwinds coming from different directions. If it's investment, if it's partners, if it's hospitals, that previously it was, for an Israeli startup doing digital health, this was like the #1 challenge. How do you, get a hospital to collaborate? How do you get them to sign? Because from the hospital perspective, they're doing this small startup a favor, even, keeping a champion inside the hospital to talk to them. And so now I feel like the doors are much more open. Everybody's looking at how can we learn from what's going on from the global setting? How can we become more efficient, more productive, more automated? How can we prevent patients from walking in if they don't have to? How can we create platforms where doctors and physicians can go on Zoom calls or video calls with patients, having had all their the tests done before they're coming to hospital, et cetera. And even more, like we have some great opportunities coming out of Israel in the space of immunization, or kind of like creating the atlas of the personalized health. Just yesterday, there was a great PR of one of our companies, Immunai, that raised $215 million and reached a unicorn status. This is exactly what they're doing, because each person is different. Even if we both have the same illness, it will have different expression and different treatment just because of who we are. So I think the whole notion of personalized health and digital health across the world is something that we're seeing great momentum in Israel.
Thank you very much, Moar. So Moar actually concentrated quite a bit on the digital health side as you're coming out of the situation, or still we are in the situation. Ali, you are an investor also. I'm going to go to you next. What do you see that going to become the next trend, or where the entrepreneurs should focus, right, as they're trying to put together a startup for themselves as well? So your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's a good question. I mean, in the blockchain space, I think one of the things that we've maybe been luckier with, as the pandemic hit, is most of these companies were already remote or primarily remote in nature. And so we didn't really see a hit during COVID on our portfolio. In fact, we almost saw an acceleration as people moved more digital, into things like gaming or sort of improving, anything from supply chain or looking at digital solutions, across the board, decentralized finance. All of these topics started taking off, even more sort of as the pandemic sort of, wore on. So, I think naturally we had an advantage there. In terms of where founders should focus, I mean, we back companies across all sorts of sectors, all sorts of verticals. And, I would say for any founder, go build something that you love, you're going to enjoy, and that you're solving a real problem. Go find out, go talk to customers, go talk to businesses, find out something that's critical, that's actually needed in the world, and go build it, right? At the end of the day, like, there's no secret sauce to, for example, like, do this business and you'll become a unicorn. It's, you've got to build something that, when things are bad, you're still going to be building, and when things are good, you're still going to be building. And that's what's going to make the difference at the end of the day between a company that succeeds and thrives versus a company that doesn't.
Any precise sector that you'll pick up, Ali, that you think from your sixth sense that this is going to do really well?
So there's different things that we're definitely looking at. Like, personally, I believe that travel will come back very strong on the consumer side. It was a big topic before COVID as well. And we've got a company, for example, called TripTax, that's revolutionizing the entire tourist tax refund system to take it from hours to minutes. So we do think that sector is going to do well. Personally, I think privacy is one that is an important topic all over the world. Probably things like private internet, et cetera. Unlocking capital in digital assets, so anything from collateralized NFTs, anything with like derivatives has been really hot in sort of the decentralized manner. A lot of people have been using that as both hedging tools and speculation tools. So I think there's a lot of different areas that are popular. I think creating utility with NFTs is something that not enough people talk about. There's a lot of static NFTs out there. How are we going to create use cases to these? I think is interesting. Play to earn gaming has been a massive topic. It's going to be here for the next decade. It's going to probably consume and continue to drive substantial change, similar how we saw free to play, change the world from, essentially pay to play. We think play to earn is going to do the same thing. So there's a lot of different exciting areas. There's a lot we missed. We're not hypothesis driven always. We think the world moves too fast. Our industry moves too fast. So we have areas that we're interested in, but we're always open to ideas from founders in all sorts of areas that I might not even have mentioned there.
Thank you, Ali. Sebastian, coming to you, same question. Like, as we are almost looking like at the tail end of COVID, what are the technology areas you think are going to shine?
Yes, I think it goes back to a little bit of what I was mentioning in the last question. I think what I'm interested in to see is there's some integrations between a couple of sectors that are going to be interesting to see. And for example, the remote working, you have mentioned before how important it is, and it's going to be. But I think it's interesting to see it from an education perspective as well, like how if that's going to keep increasing for people that don't have access to rescaling or retraining, how we're going to increase that amount of the workforce in emerging markets, for example. So I think education technologies are going to be relevant for the next couple of years because of what's happening with remote working and the decentralization of education, I would say. So that's pretty interesting. More related to to the amount of liquidity that is in the market today and the investment that we have received, for example, in Latin America in the first 6 months of $10 billion in Latin America poured into the market. If you look at let's say an average of $40,000 or maybe a little bit less a year in salaries, that means that we will need to be hiring like 250,000 people in like a year. 12 months to 18 months. Investors normally require runways. Where are we going to find that talent? And I think that will require a lot of workforce development, I would say, for sure, all over the world, to be honest. So the other one that we have seen, and I'm close to, because from the organization that I work for, we invest a lot in research, in R&D in general, and in life sciences because of the nature of where I am. There's a lot of pharmaceutical industry, and I think it's interesting to see how, because of COVID, most of the processes that usually took 5 to 10 years suddenly start to take less than a year, like FDA, for example, regulations. And I think those are opportunities that are not necessarily for you to be starting developing new medications that can go through FDA, but also as startups that can be around the industries that are growing and that are being FDA approved and growing. Examples that we have worked with, for example, are when the vaccine was approved, we needed to understand how are you going to transport the vaccine in places like Brazil, or in even more distributed remote places. So how are you going to cool them down? How are you going to use technology to do that? So medical devices is going to be an industry that I will look into a lot in the next couple of years because of the transformation that we suffer, I would say, positively in that sense in the last couple of years.
So, do you think, Sebastian, that during this COVID time, you as an investor personally were a little bit conservative or cautious?
I think at the beginning, probably it was a bit more uncertain, but we quickly doubled down. And I've been in many uncertain situations before. I spent Hurricane Maria here in Puerto Rico, and that was probably the most uncertain and also threatened. So I know that in those cases, you have to regroup and look a little bit more in the future and invest heavily, as soon as that happens. So we needed to double down.
Same question for Moar. Do you think that you have been conservative during this COVID time as you invested?
Sorry, if I think it to be concentrated?
No, conservative, in terms of like
conservative.
cautious
Listen.
about the whole thing.
Listen, I think if anything, it really presents more opportunity. I mean, we were this year, we thought we came into this year, or like in the middle of the last year, thinking, we should be on the conservative side, but in actuality, it was one of the most active years we've had, I want to say ever. We saw so many opportunities that we wanted to invest in. I think funds, if you have dry powder, it's amazing. These kinds of times really can be a real opportunity. So we had a fantastic year, onboarded amazing entrepreneurs, and I think also our LPs. We thought maybe our LPs are going to be kind of like a little bit more hesitant or whatever, but it was the exact opposite. I felt people had like more time even to just consider and just be more engaged and involved. It's been, I think, for us a great opportunity. So and I think also you see it in the numbers, right? If VCs were more conservative or more hesitant or more slow to make decisions, we would not see the kind of valuations we're seeing. We weren't going to see the kind of transactions that we're seeing on Wall Street. So I think what the world is feeling is that people are hyperactive. People are more active than ever. And I think that's the only thing that we should always kind of keep top of mind, because on one hand, entrepreneurs are building much bigger companies. The dream is no longer to be on the unicorn club, it's to be in the decacorn club.
Yeah.
IPOing companies, not the end of the road. It's kind of somewhere in the early or beginning or middle of the road. Entrepreneurs want to stay on longer and build big businesses. So that's on one hand, kind of driving up momentum. They're raising more money, more serious money, building big companies, sustainable businesses. They're not looking to sell quickly and kind of integrate into another big company. They want to be the big company. So on one hand, you see that. On the other hand, you see a lot of active investors, a lot of capital inflow. And together, a lot of very significant companies are being built up. And we all need to kind of understand that with kind of great power comes great responsibility in a way. So
Yeah,
like when you
sure.
take a lot of money, it's also a lot of responsibility. You need to show for a lot more. And so if this continues to be the case, and we will continue to see this exponential growth, then all will be okay. But we should always be mindful of the fact that there might be a correction coming up in the next few years. And the companies that are going to be, fast moving and are going to get into any correction in the world in a strong position, they're going to be the ones who are going to come out of it more successfully. And this has been the case, in 2009 as well. So we're very optimistic. We're very much looking into new opportunities, and we feel it chimes into kind of like the global climate.
Thank you, Moar. I really appreciate it. My last question will be to Courtney. Sebastian, actually, when he was mentioning about technology and innovation, he actually had a very good point. He talked about talent. And I'm hearing this from all the startups that I have invested personally also. I have invested in 200 plus companies around. And everybody's talking about finding top talent has been very challenging, and it is becoming more and more challenging. Moar and Ali all talked about, we're seeing a lot more money, decacorns are coming out, but we need people. How, I'm sure that you're seeing the same problem as you're building your own startup. How did you solve that problem? You talked about the remote, work pool at some time. Please also tell us how you're putting them together. Talk about the innovation on that side.
Yeah, no, I just got off a call this morning where we're talking about the problem is recruiting. It's always recruiting. And then when it's not recruiting and you can't raise money, it's letting go of people. And then when you get money, it's like hiring people. It's just terrible thing that we all have to go through in startups. Yeah, I mean, I told a company that I invested in last week, he has like 3 people in his company. He's like, who should my next hire be? I was like, a recruiter, because the day one you start recruiting people are the same people you can recruit, over the next 3-4 years. So the sooner you start building out that, it's just like sales, right? Like I live in the world of sales and marketing. And so just as we have a CRM of customers, you need to have a CRM of folks that you can tap for sales, for product and marketing, for UI UX, for development, all of these different functions that we all have to deal with. So I think that's the best thing any startup can do is hire a junior recruiter to start and grow them with the company. And then they'll feel a sense of ownership over that database and grow out the recruiting team. And that would be great. In pinches, we all use, I'm sure everyone's LinkedIn is full of like 20,000 requests saying, hey, do you need help with recruiting? I'll only charge you an arm and a leg. And so sometimes you have to do those. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But we continue to do those as well on roles that are difficult. I think the other piece of recruiting, which is another whole piece of innovation and opportunity, is how to speed up the recruitment process. We have gotten the feedback from Latin American recruiters that our recruiting process is very American, meaning that it's long and it takes and it's not fast enough for recruiting. But the reality is, I mean, a lot of our positions, particularly in technology and product, I mean, we have like 1,000, like a number of people entering to get one out that can really actually pass our coding tests, that can, fulfill the positions needs that we need. Obviously, there are different levels of technology developers that we need, as well as different levels of product managers that we need. But I think having a rigorous interview process that's not only on the technical side for any position, but also on the culture side is important, because we have had people that we've had to let go because there's cultural differences for things that they value differently. So, they always say, hire slow, fire fast. And I think that that makes sense. And then the last piece I would say is that it sort of all comes back to hiring, the point that Ali made before, which was that, build a company that you love, that you believe in, that's actually going to really do something in the world, and not just another feature on another product, which I think I saw a lot of in Silicon Valley. I see less of in Latin America because I think there's real problems to solve. But if you do that and convince yourself that you're building, a decacorn or whatever is the new hurdle that we want to get to, it's so much easier for you to convince other people of that. And it comes across in recruiting. It comes across in raising money that you're actually solving a real problem. And even when the chips are down, for us, COVID sucked. We're a payroll company focused on SMBs in Latin America. Talk about a tough market. But raising more money wasn't difficult because we're actually solving a real problem, right? And if you ask, are those 4 million SMBs in Mexico going to run payroll in Excel in 10 years? The answer is probably no, right? Especially if they're ordering Uber on their phone and food to their door through Rappi and managing their bank on their phone. So just sort of I think at the heart of recruitment is really a valuable story and a passionate story about something you're working on.
Thank you very much. I think we had a great discussion. Thanks to you, Courtney, Sebastian, Ali, and more. I hope the audience got a lot of information from you, and wish you all the best in whatever you're doing. Thank you once again for joining us, and thank you very much.